newspapers or see on television reports about the tragic situation in the Middle East. And it's natural to ask the question, how can people go on living among all the violence and hatred? How can they not despair when it seems that at any time their own neighbors could turn against them and their families? There's great poverty and despair in our society too, from terrorist attacks to the denial of people's humanity, economic exploitation, manipulation of our desires, ideological hatred, and so on. So the question applies to us too. How do we live in the face of an increasingly nihilistic culture and a fragmented society? To answer these questions, what is needed are not theories, but witnesses. People who have not given up on their humanity in the face of difficult situations, who have been able to recognize the fundamental positivity of reality and to keep seeking happiness in spite of all the contradictions. We are fortunate to have with us tonight one such witness, Father Vincent Nagle. He's a missionary of the priestly fraternity of the Missionaries of St. Charles Borromeo. Originally from California, he left for the Holy Land, where he was a parish priest for a few small Christian communities in Nablus and
Ramallah.
Thank you. After many years, Father Nagle recently returned to live in the West and is an exceptional observer of life in these two very different contexts. He now works as a traveling preacher. He's finally traveled to New York City, but his residence is in Milan, Italy. And so now I give you Father Vincent Nagle.
Yeah, it's a good question. More so than we realize, because this manipulation of our desires is much more effective, than we suspect. We do not suspect that we are being so manipulated. And so we hear that, we say, yeah, that must be true for some people, But, could you come here, please? I know, you can't hear, right?
Perfectly. Perfectly. No, you're perfect. Okay.
Who cannot hear me? Raise your hand. I know that's a joke. But, but if you're sitting in the back and you feel like I'm not making that clear, just I can do something like this, come forward or something like that. Boy, this is heavy.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll save that for an emergency. But, I remember when I was first living overseas, I was 22. I had just graduated from college. 3 days after graduation, I went to Morocco, where I lived by myself in a small Moroccan city, working as an English teacher in a high school, Moroccan government high school. And then after that, I went to Saudi Arabia and again lived on my own teaching. And when I came back, and all that time I was very much cut off from mass media and things like that. There weren't all these methods of communication that we have today. I'm talking ancient history.
You are 25 now, right?
Yeah, I'm 25 now. And so I remember coming back and being really impressed by how everyone was talking about, okay, some people this way or some people that way, depending on where you are, about the same things all the time. And these things didn't really arise out of their own personal experience at home, in their own community, at work, but through the mass media, through the newspapers at the time, no longer, or television or radio, etc. And I remember really having this flash, more than a flash, it was really a bomb that really said, our chains are being yanked all the time. And we're so used to it, it's just the water we swim in. You know, if you ask a fish, so, how, you know, tell me what you think about water. The fish is going to say to you, water, what's that? You know, they don't know what not water is. It's, you know, water is what you're in all the time. You know, I once in a while, I say to people, you know why businesses throughout the world spend billions and billions and billions every year on advertisement? And they say, no. I say, because it works. You know? That's why. You know, so really, without an anchor that doesn't arise, you know, from the powers that be, without an anchor that judges everything in our life, that touches us in our homes, that arises out of friendship and community, we are really, really at the hands of manipulation. But it is not primarily through desire that it is done, and that's what I want to talk about. Desire is certainly a secondary tool, but it's not the primary tool by which we are manipulated. The primary tool is fear. Fear. You know, there's not hardly one politician who at a certain point of the campaign is not going to be telling you about why it'd be great to vote for him, but why it's so terrible to vote for the other. You know, why do they all do negative campaigning? Because it works. Because that's where you get to people. That's, you know, you can be far away and you know, and talk about someone's fear, to talk to someone's desire, except for the banal, everyday things like lust, you know. Okay, anyone can do that from anywhere, you know. Get me lustful, boy, that was hard, huh? You know, so, but fear, you know, we're wide open. We are wide open. In the letter to the Hebrews, the author, which we're supposed to say, who knows whether it was St. Paul or not? I think it was, but, you know. But the letter to the Hebrews, the author says, and Satan subjected all of humanity through fear of death. Because every fear that we have is only a manifestation of one fear. There's only one fear we have. It's death. Anything else is simply a personal manifestation of the one fear that everyone has. And that's going to be important for what I'm about to say. And now, for the camera, I'm going back to the podium. I went to live and work on the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority in 2006. And I had been there several times with pilgrimages. Since I had studied Arabic and Islamic, Islamology, I actually had met Palestinians through these studies and had friendships there. In fact, I remember right after 2001, the events here in New York, against which I blaspheme today, and I apologize, you know, for that. But the new building really is very beautiful, you know. So, when I was in 2001, in fact, the vice president of Bethlehem University, which is a Catholic university in Bethlehem, the first Palestinian university, they called me and said, we need you here. We need someone to really be working as a chaplain with our students because, you know, they're a minority. They're 30% of the population of the university are Christians, and they have no voice. They are just intimidated. They just join what the majority is doing, but there's no Christian voice among the students in a Christian university in Palestine. And I said, no, I've got a job. you know, and it's going well, and I haven't gotten fired, and that's good, and so I'll stay here until I get fired. Well, I did, you know, get fired. Yeah. Which was devastating for me. I mean, I do laugh about it as well, but it was devastating. I won't go into that story. It's not the story I want to tell. But it is meaningful for this story because when I departed for the Holy Land, I wasn't in my best place, you know. I had really received a huge blow. And I was sort of leaving the United States against my will, you know. But a big problem, political problem for me in the church had arisen, and I had to go. So off I went. But before I left, I remember I went for a couple months to Washington. And I have a lot of cousins around Washington, D.C. Of course, I was born and raised on the West Coast, and I don't know most of them, and I've only met a few of them. And first one I contacted was one who had come out a few times to meet us, a cousin a few years older than I am. And I went to see him at his house. His 3 kids, his wife, and it was very near where I was living at the time. And no one warned me, but apparently the wife is very anti-Catholic. You know, one of those, I grew up Catholic and I hate the Catholics, you know, sort of that thing. I didn't know, so I was pushing all her buttons, and which is a specialty of mine, I'm afraid. And yeah, by the end of the evening, she was furious, and I was just trying to keep, you know, my balance against the waves of disdain, contempt, fury, you know, that she and her best friend were pouring at me. And so about 2 hours were just me trying to answer, well, you know, not really defend the church, defend myself, but just trying to keep something minimally positive going. But finally, her last question to me was, and you're going to Palestine? Well, I don't know what she said, Israel, Palestine. These are big, loaded words. These people are dying here. How do we do this? No? Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Okay, good. Some things are not in our control. Other things are in our control. So where the sun is, isn't. But where the shade is. So I put that there. Now, so she has said, you know, in the past 50 years, all of the most intelligent people, you know, powerful, intelligent, you know, connected people in the world have tried to, you know, make this problem better, solve the problem of Palestine. What do you think you're going to do there? What good are you? You know? And I remember, you know, I listened to her and I said, well, what I hope, and there was still the Second Intifada. In fact, during the days when I left, there was the Lebanese-Israeli war, where there are lots of Hezbollah missiles coming this way and lots of F-16s going the other way. But they were landing, you know, all the newspapers had been saying that the next target was the airport at Tel Aviv, right? I remember when that plane landed, you know, and I was looking out the window. You know. So, but when she asked me that question, I mean, I answered her this way, which I answered from my heart, trepidatious of its audacity. I said, well, I guess what I want to do is go there and suffer all things with them, so that suffering all things with them, maybe they will accept from me some of my hope. And that sort of shut her up, you know. That was good. But that wasn't the point. I was just trying to answer the question. So I guess that was my program. I was going to go work and live there. There are free seats up here. You can't see them from there. But someone is going to... Mary, I think you need to free up that seat next to you.
I most certainly will.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's mine. I will free up mine as well.
There we go.
So I guess I was hoping, besides going there with really a broken heart, which I was, and a wounded faith, not a wounded faith in the sense that, do you believe that, God the Father Almighty has created heaven? Yes, yes. But a wounded relationship of trust between me and my Creator, I have to say. A wounded relationship of trust. Yet I went, and I remember the day I arrived, and we were going through the checkpoint into Bethlehem, and it was a Thursday. That's meaningful in what I'm about to say. And it was summer, it was July, and it was the afternoon, and the sun was beating down as it knows how to do. And outside the gate, there was 100 or 200 Palestinian men, all on their knees, all with their hands, clasped behind. And I said to myself something like, because I showed up, I was raised in a Zionist household. I wasn't a Zionist anymore, but I was still sympathetic, and I guess I still am sympathetic to the Zionist aspirations, at least in their original forms. And through many years of reading a great deal, I guess my basic view was, well, the underlying problem, okay, everybody's a sinner, there's violations and crimes all over, but the underlying problem, nobody's innocent, but the underlying problem is that, well, the Jews took their land and they can't accept that. Okay, and I can see that, right? So I think that's the basic problem here. I had to change my mind about that. And that's not the point of what I want to say, and I'm not trying to convince anybody about me changing my mind. I'm telling another story, but I got to tell that story to get to the other one, okay? Well, so I saw them and I said to myself that day, oh, well, that's terrible, but, I guess, Israel has to protect itself, and that's part of it, So I went in, and it didn't take long of living there, and I'm not going to tell all the steps I took. It doesn't matter. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. But I began to see that there was another story going on that I just had not really realized. And that I really had been fooled all my life, about what the story is. Notwithstanding, I had read a lot. I had met a lot of people. But I had really been fooled. And again, whether I was or not, I'm trying to get to another point. I really saw, it was still the Second Intifada, the army was still coming in and opening up fire in the middle of markets, and, innocent people dying all over the place. And I was watching that, and seeing that. But through a lot of other very small, sometimes, experiences, I really said, hey, what does that have to do with security? Hey, what does that have to do with security? And I began to see, a lot of what goes on there has nothing to do with security. It's all put behind this curtain that none of us want to look behind because we're afraid to look behind these curtains. Oh, you're doing it for my security? Well, do what you have to do. I don't want to look there. I don't want to look there. I'm afraid. I want you to take care of it because I'm afraid. I remember, I was in a doctoral program for Islamic studies and had my own opinions about Islam as a very violent ideological force in the world. Everyone thought I was crazy. No, you're so racist or whatever. I'm sorry. But that was my opinion. I had read thousands of documents, but it seemed I'm in. So I'm wrong. But after 2001, I have to say, a deep fear really insinuated itself in me. And I remember all those years saying, whatever behind, just try to keep us safe. Do what you got to do. I know it's messy. But there I realized that, man, a lot of what people do in the name of security has nothing to do with security. People have their own projects that nobody is going to judge, nobody is going to oppose, nobody is going to observe because it's all done in the name of security. And we are afraid. We are afraid. And really, I saw that the question wasn't just Israel trying to protect itself. Yes, that too, I'm sure. Yeah. But they were trying to take, and they are taking everything. The point is to get rid of the Arab population little by little, step by step, and just get rid of them, and take it all. And that's what's happening. And that's what you see there when you start to live there. And it doesn't take, 2 years or 6 years or more as I did. You can see that without anyone telling you anything in a couple of weeks. No one has to tell you anything. You say, well, what? Huh. Say, okay, there's another story here. That's not, but believe me, I'm not trying to convince you of that. You have to know that I got convinced of that. That's the only thing you got to know. Because why? Because I really became really caught up, and I was living with a family that had suffered a great deal. Here are 2 seats. Yeah, okay, over here it's better. Here's one, and there's one, and one, and one. And here's another one. So, I became caught up really in a sense of the outrage of the injustice that I was seeing. Outrage. But I will have to also admit that where I was outraged by the injustice I was seeing, that wasn't really what was driving, what was hurting me. What was hurting me was the humiliation of having been fooled for 50 years. Okay, at that time it was only 47 years, but I had really sold myself as something of an expert in all this, and had guided many people's judgments in all this, and I had been really fooled, and it wasn't so much that the Palestinians are suffering injustice, it was that, hey man, I fell for it, and I'm angry at you, because we are who we are, and I ended up really in a great deal of tension over this. I was saying my prayers and stuff, but I was swept up in the bitterness, fear, anger with everyone else. I was swept up in exactly the same, and I wasn't offering anything particularly new, I don't think. Not that I didn't have any huge savior complexes going there. It's not like, but still, I recognize that, man, I just got swept up in that, and I wasn't really offering anything new. But that situation did not continue, and that's the story. When I found what a way to witness there, I want to tell that story of how that changed for me. But I can't tell you the story of how that changed for me unless I had told you the story of how I got where I got. Okay, I'm not here as a Palestinian spokesperson or something like that. So the years passed. I went ahead learning Palestinian Arabic and getting involved, and I ended up, as pastor, or at least substitute pastor. I was the only pastor there. I don't know, the document probably didn't say I was pastor, but I was the guy in Nablus. That's where, in case you don't know where that is the second largest city of the West Bank. The largest is Hebron, and which in Arabic means Khalil, or the companion, because it's where Abraham is buried, and Abraham was known as the companion of God, and he's called that in the Quran. And companion in Arabic is Khalil, so it's called Khalil, the place of the companion. But Nablus, that's in the south of the West Bank. In the north, the capital up there, it's a city with all of its environs of about with the whole area, I suppose. Maybe 250, 300,000. And that's where there's the Jacob's well, where Jesus had the talk with the Samaritan woman. where he met the woman at the well. You know that one? I'm not going to sing. But, so in that city, there's a neighborhood that had been a Christian village, but then englobed, And during the Second Intifada, during those years, it was a community that had gone down from 5,000 to not even 600 people. Yeah, it was a community in severe discouragement. And I was working there during, at least from Thursday to Monday, because the rest of the week I was a private secretary to the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. And in May of that year, I started in August, and in May of that year, Pope Benedict XVI came for a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. It's 2009. And, when the news came that he was coming, someone somewhere in the Arab press had decided that he was not a friend of, this was all because of, the Ratisbon, what we say, Regensburg or Ratispona. The Regensburg Discourse of 2006. You don't know what I'm talking about, really, do you? Well, our great Pope Benedict, he giving a talk to the professors at the university where he had been the head of the theology department, was trying to make this point. Faith without reason is violent, and reason without faith is violent. And he used Islam as an example of this. There were big protests. You're calling us violent? We'll show you! Yeah, well, sorry about that, but that's the way it looked, And the Muslims burnt 8 churches on the West Bank. All of them Greek Orthodox, because they don't know nothing about that. And so I remember the Greek Orthodox Patriarch had to come and, hey, we hate the Pope too, man. Don't be doing that. Yeah, he did it, believe me. So, so the word was, he's not a friend of the Palestinians, he's not a friend of the cause. And so the word among the, Fatah, which is the ruling political party there, of the PLO, they decided, they're against this visit. I mean, they're not going to stop it, and everything was done correctly for it, but they're against it. Of course, and he was a German who had served in the Third Reich, and so, the Jews were against it too, and all the Christians were against it because he's not helping the Palestinian cause. And I remember there was this parish council that I relied on a great deal, as you can imagine. And relying on this parish council, the head of the parish council was this young guy, I like him a lot. He was also high up in the Fatah political structure there in Nablus. And he would give always the announcements at the end of Mass, about, the things that needed to be said to the people. I do the Mass, and I do the homily, but he gives the announcements. Hi. I know you, don't I?
Yes.
What's your name?
John Ronan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, hi, John.
Great to see you, Father.
Great to see you.
We'll catch up.
You will catch it. So, so he started to give these announcements. Okay, the Pope is coming. We don't want him to come. It's because why? I mean, among other things, the feeling was this: that all right, the Pope's going to come, and as it had been when John Paul II came in the year 2000 in March, that was before the start of the Second Intifada, which started in 2000. If you don't know what the Second Intifada is, I'm not explaining. Wikipedia has everything. So, and it had been a huge occasion for the Palestinian Christians and stuff like that. They really had hope. And in fact, all their business advisors were telling them, this 2000th birthday of Jesus is going to start a pilgrimage and tourist business here, if you guys know how to take advantage of it, that is going to make you rich, you know. And they had all the Palestinian Christian community and other parts of the Palestinian community had invested everything to create the infrastructure, create everything to welcome all the pilgrims. But of course, in September, the Second Intifada, did explode, and no